Welcome to Working with Languages. My name is Sonia. I'm your host and a multilingual digital marketing consultant. When I came across Jamie, this episode's guest, I was fascinated by his background and his multifaceted career path, and I knew I wanted to talk to him on record. This is a very personal and open conversation about achieving more than he would have dreamt of as a kid, being a composer and a linguist despite his stammer. And his work at what3words, the location finding system, is meaningful and can save lives. Let's dive in. My guest today on the podcast is Jamie Brown, who is a linguist and worked for almost 10 years at what3words as the chief linguist. So hello, Jamie.
Hi, Sonia. It's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
I came across you online recently when I was doing some research on the podcast, and I was fascinated by your background and your story, and I'm very, very happy to have you here today on the podcast. It feels very special. So, as you know, I like to start with a question for my guests, which is, what's your favorite word or phrase in a language that you speak?
That is an excellent question. I have gone a bit rogue, actually. I hope you don't mind. I've actually chosen a word in a language that I speak a bit of, but can't claim full fluency. Cornish. So lots of my family's from Cornwall. I've grown up with a lot of Cornish words around here and there. In a previous life, I was a music composer and I wrote a Requiem Mass in the Cornish language. And one of my favourite words from that setting is the word gold, which in Cornish means pride. And, that's a very big part of the Cornish identity.
Yes.
So that's my word.
Wonderful. I didn't expect a Cornish word, but then you are a master, I think, of at least a little bit of so many languages.
Yeah, I quite like having that sort of broadness of experience. That sort of goes with my personality, I think.
Yeah. So tell us more about yourself. Where do you come from? Where did you learn the languages that you speak?
Well, I grew up in the UK and, I come from a pretty monolingual background. None of my family really speak any other languages fluently. But when I was at school, I realized that I was really interested in languages. I was actually quite interested in them from a sort of academic perspective. I really liked understanding how languages fitted together and how you sort of use them in different ways and how those building blocks of the language sort of build into something like a sentence or a conversation. So that's really where it started. Well, from my entire childhood and, into my adulthood, I actually had quite a bad stammer. I couldn't even get through one sentence in English, really, for the majority of my life. So sort of that whole being a linguist thing didn't really feel like something that was available to me. So I sort of, maybe like retreated into a corner and just sort of started to learn about how, sort of the stuff behind the conversations, how languages express different things in different ways and how different words are made in different languages and what's the reason for that and how languages relate to each other and link up across the world. So that was really how I started.
Fascinating. So did you travel abroad when you were a kid with your family on holiday, or did you spend most of your time in the UK?
Mostly in the UK. So I grew up near London, but like I said, I've got very close family ties to Cornwall. So Cornwall was where we were in the summer holidays. But like I said, I was sort of beavering away in the corner at learning languages and being interested about the world. So I had a few pen pals around the world, one of whom was Icelandic. So I decided that I would learn how to write her letters in Icelandic.
So you wrote each other letters in Icelandic?
She wrote to me in English and I wrote to her in what I can only assume was extremely broken Icelandic.
Fascinating.
So I travelled sort of from the confines of my own room, maybe.
Are you still in touch with her?
I'm not, no, sadly. I would know how to get in touch, but we lost touch a few years ago.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you are a composer. Is that's if I remember correctly, that's what you studied first at university, composing and music?
Yeah, it is. music is a language. It's all very closely related. I liked languages as a child, but I had a stammer, so I didn't really feel that it was open to me. And music is just the other side of that coin, isn't it? And the good thing about being a musician is that you don't have to talk to people, or at least you don't have to talk a lot to people, particularly not in public. The way to really not have to talk to people is to be a composer, because then, quite like writing to my Icelandic pen pal, you can do a lot of it from your own room with a piano, with some transcribing software, and, write whole symphonies and operas, which I did, connect with people in that way using language, but not having to speak it yourself. So, yeah, I went to university, studied music, specialized in composition.
And when you composed music, did you write the music only, or did you write the lyrics as well?
Mostly music only, but, in my sort of interested in languages persona, I guess, I wrote lots of music in lots of different languages. So, like I said, I wrote a requiem mass in the Cornish language. I wrote stuff in Finnish and Swedish and Latin and Portuguese and French, all these sorts of languages that I would find something that I was interested in. I would work with a linguist who would sort of help me to understand sort of how the text fitted together, how it was pronounced, how I would best be able to sort of represent it in music. So that was particularly interesting for me.
How did you decide, today I want to compose something and have the lyrics in Finnish? Why would you decide on a specific language?
Often it was a particular interest, like I'm always interested in languages. Like I said, I'm a bit of a magpie, I like to pick up a lot of things from a lot of places. My interest in Finnish is actually quite interesting. I As a sort of teenager and early adult with a stammer, I started to get a little bit sort of obsessed with the idea of, is there a language out there that I don't stammer in? Because, stammering is such a sort of phonetic thing, and particular sounds are problematic to particular people. And I sort of, I knew that I stammered extremely badly in French, worse than I did in English, but I sort of started to look around. And I actually went to Helsinki on holiday with a friend in my early 20s and found that actually, for some reason, Finnish was quite an easy language for me to say out loud. So then I started to sort of delve into it a bit more and got interested in Finnish poetry, which sounds ridiculous to me. Sounds ridiculous for somebody who doesn't speak it to get interested in. I'm really interested in how languages sound and like the combinations of the consonants and the vowels and just that sort of sound world, I think.
Yeah, and also I guess how do we move the mouth and the tongue when we speak a specific language?
Yeah, exactly. And as a stammerer growing up, I was absolutely obsessed with, I just couldn't wrap my head around the fact that some people were able to produce sound without having to think about it. And I would really sort of study people's mouths as they were talking. Like I'd really sort of, and this sounds a bit weird, sort of eye contact is king. But actually, I was really watching people's mouths and sort of wondering, like, how are you doing that without any sort of physical problems with producing all these noises that I knew I wasn't able to? So I guess that all ties into it as well.
Yeah. But, as someone who has learned languages, I know that especially at the beginning, when I learn a language, I just look at the mouth of the person. I just stare even, because it feels like easier to understand what they're actually saying rather than looking into their eyes. So there's something common there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, that's tied into lip reading, isn't it? And sort of somehow that can relate it slightly more closely to the written word than if you're looking at the eyes. Yeah. And obviously, as a learner, it's easier to read than to listen. That's very interesting. I'd never realised that actually I wasn't the only one that was slightly weirdly transfixed on people's mouths while
Yeah.
they were talking to me.
I've done that a lot. Yeah, I've done that a lot.
Good, I'm glad to hear it.
So at some point after your music studies, you moved to Brazil.
Yes, I did. I sort of worked for a while in the music industry, and then a quite long-term job came to an end, and a couple of other things were happening in my life. And in my late 20s, I thought it's now or never. Move abroad whilst, everything's aligned in the right way to let you do that. So the story goes that I stuck a pin in a map. It was actually slightly more focused than that. But I ended up in a city called Belo Horizonte in the southern part of Brazil. And yeah, there I was. I thought I was going to try and get a job as an English teacher. Brazil's one of those countries where, basically every street corner has an independent language school. Most people want to learn English, so I assumed that was going to be easy. I must say, at this point, my stammer was improving. I was able to control my stammer a lot better, which quite often happens to people as you move through your 20s. Stammers that were quite bad as a teenager can often sort of start to level out. So that was already happening. And to cut a long story short, I didn't get a job as an English teacher, but I did get a job as a receptionist in a language school. And it turns out that one really good way to learn a new language is to get a job where you have to answer the phone in it every day. So I did that. It was a really sort of life-affirming time for me for a number of reasons, traveling abroad, being independent, meeting new people, that sort of all of that good stuff. But also because I am naturally quite good at learning languages. I learned Portuguese really quickly, and people started to compliment me on my spoken language, which is something that was extremely rare in my life. Like being complimented on how I spoke was the exact opposite of what happened my entire life. People were sort of always a bit confused or surprised about my stammer, and it was never something that I felt good at. So to have all those compliments was actually, really reminded me that actually my first love was languages, and that maybe this actually was something that was available to me as a career. So I came back from Brazil and enrolled in a master's in linguistics.
Who were the other people at studying linguistics with you? Were there people with a similar interest with you, or is there a range of people really?
On the master's course?
Yeah.
There's a real range of people, actually. So I studied at Birkbeck College, which is part of the University of London. It's a great place to be, but one of its sort of USPs, I guess, is that the lectures are all in the evening. So it's sort of particularly for people who are working as well as studying. So I would go up to Russell Square on a Tuesday and a Thursday after work, sit in lectures. And, there's a massive range of people from all stages of life, people who were actually 21 years old and fresh out of their undergrad, right up to people that had retired and were just interested in linguistics, people who had some language element to their job, or people like me who felt like it was something that they wanted to pursue and potentially work in. At that time, I thought I was going to become a translator. I had learned Portuguese, obviously, so I thought I'd be a Portuguese to English translator, but had that sort of academic interest in linguistics as well. So wanted to see where that would take me long term.
And once you finished your master, what was the first job that you had that involved languages or linguistics?
Well, when I was doing the masters, I was working at the Institute of Psychiatry, which is part of King's College London. I was working in the team of the Vice Dean for Education there, which was super interesting. But quite soon after I finished my master's, something really unexpected happened. One of my friends posted on Facebook, "Do I know anybody who loves languages and Microsoft Excel? I might have an interesting proposition for you." And I was like, those are my two favorite things in the world. Me. And to cut another long story short, she was asking on behalf of a friend of hers who was starting up a company called what3words. And they were looking for somebody who was interested in languages and was interested in sort of language research and product building in lots of different languages. I'm not going to call it translation because it wasn't quite as simple as that, but sort of in that general localization, product building, research type area. And it was, help them out for a few hours a month. So I did that alongside working at the IOP. And then after a while, that became my full-time job. And the company grew and grew and grew. And I was, extremely lucky to be there pretty much from the beginning.
That sounds incredible. First of all, Jerome, by chance, really, that you found this job through a friend on Facebook, posting something on Facebook. But also to be there from the very beginning feels really incredible.
Yeah, so lucky. And I think, so much of those startup opportunities really are about that. It is about saying yes to every opportunity and, seeking stuff out that you might be interested in doing. Yeah. Because you never
Absolutely.
know what crazy things somebody's trying to do and how you might be able to help them out.
Absolutely. For listeners who don't know, can you tell us really briefly what 3words is about?
Yeah, sure. So, what3words is a global addressing system. Basically, what it's done is it's divided the entire world into 3-meter squares, and it's given each one of those squares a unique 3-word address. So, a string of 3 words that is unique to that particular square on the planet. So, for example, my home, the front door of my house is inside one of these 3-meter squares, obviously. And the words for that location are flags, lively, clash. So if I want to tell somebody exactly where I live, one way that I can do it is to say, my what3words address is flags, lively, clash. I'll download the free app, or they can use it on their desktop, as well as into the search bar, and it takes you directly to where I live, which is useful in a number of ways. It's particularly good for talking about places that don't have a regular street address or have a bad street address. There's so many different places in the world where, if you're in the middle of a forest, or if you're on a beach, or if you're in the countryside, there is no way of, in a sort of human friendly way, telling somebody exactly where you are. Obviously, there's GPS coordinates, lat longs, but that's prone to error when a human is sort of reading out strings of 10, 12 numbers at a time. So what3words is just that sort of human-friendly way of remembering that way of describing exactly where you are. The words are all completely random. So obviously flags, lively, and clash have no relation to each other. They don't describe the front door of my house in any way. It's completely randomized. It's just a string of memorable words that people can use to tell you exactly where they are.
Yeah. So I use it quite regularly, actually. For example, I go to the airport by car and I leave my car there. And you can just imagine, there's hundreds and thousands of cars there. So I just, mark where my car is parked. I don't have to think about it when I come back. And it's just so convenient because it just takes you there. And I
Yeah.
can see how, there's so many uses for it. So, for example, in an emergency, when you are in the middle of nowhere and you need people to come and rescue you or come to you. Or even in places with addresses that are not very clear, or addresses, that are not easy to understand. Or when there's so many, in the UK, for example, there's so many roads that are called King's Road or Queen's Road, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. The number of times you type something into Google and you don't really look at um, the option that you've selected, and it's actually not the right thing. Yeah, what3words takes all of that away. And like you said, with the emergency services, it is a life-saving system as well. So in the UK, you can tell a 999 call handler your what3words address, and they'll know exactly where you are. They might even prompt you to give it to them if you ring them up. You've had a car accident on a road in the middle of nowhere that you don't know, and they ask you where you are, and you say, "Well, I don't know. I'm on this road between here and here, but otherwise I don't know." They will then at that point quite likely ask you for your what3words address. Helps the emergency services get you quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. It's much better than saying, "Oh, I see a lot of trees."
Exactly.
Yeah. And there's also a commercial use behind it, emergency services, but also logistic companies, postal companies. So I find that very, very fascinating because it's not purely a linguistic product. It has a real use and a commercial service behind it, which means that you were able to develop it in a lot of languages.
Yes, we did. So over 10 years, we launched 61 language versions of what3words. And the tricky thing about it, and sort of this is going back to what I was saying about it involving a bit of research, it wasn't sort of pure localization. It won't come as a surprise to you or your listeners that you can't simply translate what3words addresses in English into every other language in the world. That doesn't, the word snowman in English might be one of the words in a 3-word address, but in French, snowman translates to bonhomme de neige, which is 3 words already. So it doesn't work. And the other way as well, French piscine translates into English as swimming pool. So, you can't always do it. So right from the very beginning, it was clear that we weren't going to translate what3words addresses or the words within them, but we had to build completely independent products completely from scratch.
Interesting. I never thought about that. I only thought, if a French person doesn't speak English, it's not very good that they should be forced to use our list in English. You need to have it in French. But yes, of course, things translate in very different ways. And sometimes one word becomes 3 words or 2 words in a different language. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Or words, there's a lot of curation behind the scenes that goes into what words you end up seeing in a what3words address. So, for example, we would remove homophones from what3words addresses because, a pair of homophones are 2 words that don't mean the same thing and don't have the same spelling, but they are pronounced identically. For
Okay.
example, in English, the word sale is homophone because SALE, but SAIL as well. So, for example, if I was ringing 999 from where I've had a car crash in the middle of nowhere, and the what3words address that I had was sale great made, the call handler needs to know really quickly which sale, which great, which made,
Yeah.
because there's no grammatical context to tell you which one it is. So to avoid that problem happening, we just remove all of those homophones from the list. You won't find sale in either of its spellings. You won't find made in either of its spellings in a what3words address. And then again, homophones aren't the same in every language because the words are translated and then they might be homophones with other things. So you really do have to go, from the ground up, creating what3words in each language, which is actually a real opportunity because it means not only are you taking out the right words from the product, but you're also able to really think about how to make what3words user-friendly for speakers of that particular language. So for example, English is quite grammar light. There's not many forms of the same word, whereas in other languages, German, for example, there's lots of different conjugations of the same verb. And actually, do you want all of those words possible to be in a what3words address? I would say probably the answer is no, because you want the words to be as simple and as straightforward as possible.
So when you built a new list in a new language, how did you prioritize certain words? Where did you start from?
So just say when I talk about putting words into the product, what I actually mean is we created massive word lists and then an algorithm did the rest. So an algorithm then spat them out into all of the 3 meter squares on the planet. So we don't have to sort of manually put every word into every square. So basically what we did in the languages team was we created word lists, but very highly curated word lists that, we knew had the words in them that we wanted to be there. So we decided that we would have to have large teams of native speakers of each language. So the form would be, we would decide to do a new language. We would recruit linguists, but also non-linguists, because we're trying to represent the kinds of people that would be using what3words. And, everybody's going to use what3words, not just people who are trained in linguistics. And at the same time, we were trying to build up a database of words. So for lots of languages, you can find or pay for big word lists online. For other languages, that's a bit harder to come by. And we would also get our team involved in sort of helping us to make sure that all of the great words in their language were in that database. So we would play games with them, sort of almost like sort of nursery school games. Like we would give them 1 hour, and we'd pay them for an hour, and we'd say, write down your 500 favorite words in your language. Just like go crazy. Think of all of the, wonderful words. It like have a great meaning or mean something personal to you or just sound nice or whatever it is. But we want to pack this database with really lovely words, because then what you're going to do is you're going to go through it and remove all the words that shouldn't be there. So then the words that we end up with will all be in what3words addresses, and we want those to be the best ones possible.
And the words that you take out are the homophones. What's the word again that you used? Yeah. We talked about that. And probably also words that are not very polite. Anything else that you would take out?
Exactly. Words that have some sort of unpleasant meaning, because the first thing people do when they download the what3words app is they go to their front door. They're like, oh, I wonder what the 3 words for my house are. And if you went and the 3 words for your front door was like evil, dishonest criminals, you couldn't fail but have a bit of a negative reaction to that, right? Like, as adults, we can rationally understand that we're not trying to describe the people that live in that house with their 3-word address. But you can't fail but think, oh, that's not so great. So we want to give people, that positive user experience, I guess. And it's really important, words and language is so important and can be used in such a hurtful way to so many people that we want to make sure that that's not possible. There's a few other things. Obviously, we need to make sure that all the words are spelled correctly and anything that people might have that sort of reaction to. But what was really interesting, like I said, we worked on 61 languages. And those words that people have a negative reaction to aren't the same in every language. So, for example, I was working with our Tamil language team. As the project manager, we'd built this system for people to rate words and to give them particular scores or codes based on their meaning or their commonness. So you could see how particular words were performing with the team. And I noticed with our Tamil language team, one of the words that was performing really badly, lots of people were saying that it was very negative, was the word turtle. And I thought, that's an interesting one. I've never seen turtle being described as particularly negative or particularly offensive before. I wonder what's happening. So I emailed a couple of our Tamil language team and I said, just out of interest, what's wrong with turtle? And they said, well, really interesting one, sort of ummed and ahed about it, but there is a particular Tamil saying, and I now can't remember exactly what the Tamil saying was, but the gist of it is, if a turtle enters your house, it will be disaster. And it's one of these phrases that, it's just one of those things that Tamil people say, but also really pay attention to it. So it's very unlikely, for example, that you'll find a picture of a turtle or a little like ceramic turtle in a Tamil speaker's house, because they do have this association with it being unlucky. And the team said that would extend to what3words addresses. If a Tamil person's front door had the word turtle in it, it would be like evil, dishonest criminals. They would be like, oh God, that's awful. And yet, this was the fascinating thing about the job at what3words. You found out all these cultural, linguistic things. And, we did a bit of research on this particular phrase. And its origins are shrouded in mystery, as are a lot of linguistic oddities. But the most compelling suggestion of where this phrase comes from is when there's a tsunami brewing out at sea, the turtles can feel this happening. So they're swimming in the sea. They can feel this tsunami sort of brewing under the surface. So they swim to shore and they run up to shore and they go into people's houses. And people associate the turtles coming with the wave coming later.
Interesting.
And that's why you won't find the word turtle in any what3words addresses in Tamil.
Fascinating. Local and specific.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important for you to have really people with local language and cultural skills.
Yeah, exactly. It isn't just linguistic, it is cultural as well, understanding why people might have a particular reaction to one word or not, but also understanding across different language communities, does this word have the same meaning? Are there particular sort of connotations in one particular part of the world that, other parts of the world don't have. There's lots of, I won't say them out loud for fear of offending your Spanish-speaking listeners, but, there's a particular verb which in Spain means to catch a bus or to catch, which in Argentina means something very different. And an Argentinian would not want to have that word in their 3-word address. So, we're sort of understanding these sort of regional cultural differences as well.
But then I'm assuming that the Spanish language, you have one list and one app, one language for Spain and Argentina and all the other Spanish-speaking countries. So you need to account for these differences.
Yeah, exactly.
So does it mean that you hired linguists and language specialists from all of these countries to cover any sort of possible offensive words?
Yeah, absolutely. Which is a lot easier to do in a language like Finnish, where you only have to look in one country. But for a language like Spanish or English, Arabic, languages like that, you're sort of really trying to build a team of native speakers that is both manageable from a project management point of view, but the best represents everybody that speaks that language. So it's not just about where they come from, what variant of that language they speak, but it's also about what their background is, what their age is, like really changes how you use language and what words you might know or not know, I was speaking to my 18-year-old nephew recently and I made some mention of a modem and he said, "What's that?" Of course, why would he know what a modem is? But to me, it's a very obvious word. And probably my grandparents wouldn't know what a modem is either. So, you have to sort of really try to represent as many people as you can.
So at the same time, then it is possible that in 20 years' time, there might be a word or two that has gone out of use that people don't use anymore.
There might be, or it could be a word that, has dramatically changed context, changed its meaning. I think the vast majority of language actually changes extremely slowly. But yeah, there may well be some words in our languages that, in 20, 30 years' time, people might be like, remember those? That was cool.
So technology probably is one of the areas that changes quite fast. So I'm guessing you have fewer words about technology than other areas of life.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know if the English word smartphone is anywhere. It might be. But, if smartphones really fall out of use over the next 20 years, at least people will see that word and, it's been preserved, which is also quite nice, I think.
Yeah. And was there a language that you found particularly challenging?
Languages are both the most beautiful thing that humanity has to offer and the most infuriating, I would say. Every single language that we worked on, and like I said, 61 languages, every single one threw up something that we'd never come across before. And some of those things were quite easy to overcome or to decide what to do with. Others were a lot harder. Thinking, so there's a particular number of words you need for one of these word lists. In most languages, that's 25,000, which is a lot of words, actually. And so the way that a language creates new vocabulary is actually really important to how easy it is to hit that total of 25,000 words. So languages that create lots of compound words like German or Hungarian or Finnish is actually a little bit easier for what3words because they're gluing words together to make new words, which in other languages might still be 2 words. So thinking of an example, in Hungarian, the word for apple is 1 word, but also the word for apple sauce, apple juice, apple tree, they're all single words as well. So in English, you don't have as many sort of options, I guess. Languages that, other things that are hard for what3words, languages that have lots and lots and lots of homophones make it harder. Languages that don't have a consistent spelling would be very difficult for what3words. Japanese was tricky to know what to do with at first because Japanese has three different writing scripts, and that sort of in and of itself creates a lot of homophones. So actually, we made the decision very early on in Japanese. So sorry if you know this, but it is interesting. Japanese writes in a mixture of kanji, which look like Chinese characters, hiragana, which is more of a sort of syllabary phonetic, and then katakana, which is like hiragana but is used for loan words. So my name, written in Japanese, would be spelled out of the sounds of my name, but it would be in the katakana writing script. So actually, Japanese what3words addresses are only written in the hiragana script, which is a phonetic syllabary. So that makes it, that makes homophones pretty much non-existent. And is actually really user-friendly for Japanese people because they don't have to switch between keyboards like you usually do when you're typing in Japanese. So people have actually said, it took a minute to get my head around, these words that I was used to seeing in kanji written out in hiragana instead. But actually, it's really great, really user-friendly. And there's always a way around. There isn't a language that we weren't able to get enough words in.
Brilliant. Brilliant. What's the last language that you added?
The most recent language was Kazakh,
Kazakh.
which is a super interesting language. They all are, but for many reasons. Kazakh is written in the Cyrillic script predominantly, but it hasn't always been. It's actually a Turkic language. It's sort of one of the easternmost of the Turkic languages, and it's predominantly written in the Cyrillic script now because Kazakhstan used to be part of the USSR. There's actually a lot of talk at the moment about whether the country might switch to the Latin script for a number of reasons. So that was also front and center of mind, talking about, like we were saying, about language change. Sometimes as what3words, we have to future-proof the products that we have. So when we were looking at creating the Cyrillic script version of Kazakh, we also had a mind on how that would work if we had to switch it to the Latin script in future as well.
That's fascinating. I know that, for example, in Russian, the C and K, which are pronounced K, there's only one letter or one way of writing it. So that's fascinating. If you then switch from that writing to a Latin alphabet, it creates new challenges that you have to overcome. Interesting.
Yeah, it does. It's so interesting because Kazakh is a Turkic language, and it historically wasn't written in either the Cyrillic script or the Latin script. It has sounds that, the letters available in those two writing scripts don't completely accurately convey. There's a letter in Kazakh Cyrillic that looks like the Russian K, but it's got a little tag on the bottom of the K. That is transcribed into the Latin script as a Q. And to me, with my sort of English-speaking brain, it's really hard to hear the difference between those two letters in spoken Kazakh. But to a Kazakh speaker, it's completely clear straight away if it's a K or a Q. But yeah, got to be careful with that sort of thing as well.
Yeah, luckily with your word list, you didn't have to think about all the pronunciation, but only the way of writing it.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to think about the pronunciation in order to take out homophones.
Yes, that's true.
But yeah, with the writing for sure.
How long would it take you normally to develop a new set of language, a new set of word lists?
From start to end, usually about 4 to 5 months, depending on how complicated the language was, how easy it is to reach that 25,000 words, that sort of thing. So that would involve hiring all of the speakers that we needed. And there was quite an intensive training period as well, because obviously, people aren't going to be expected to know how to create a what3words language version. So we have to teach them about, well, these are the kinds of words that we want to remove, but actually these aren't. And, there is a sliding scale of negativity and like, where are you going to draw the line and what else do you need to look out for? And at the end of the day, these people are literally creating the what3words product for us and project managing it, but I can't look at the finished Kazakh language version and QA it myself because I don't speak the language. So we're really putting a lot of trust in these people. So there's a lot of training.
So did you work with the same people then over the course of the 4 or 5 months, or did you divide it into smaller chunk and had more people work with you?
The same people over the course of that time, and where possible, we would go out to meet them in person as well. I'm a really big believer in the power of face-to-face human interaction, and particularly at the beginning of a project like this, when you want to instill that trust as well. I think it was absolutely invaluable to us that we would go out and meet as many people as we can, and we'd have these big meetings where we'd like discuss the training and be like, hey, what do you think about this word? Some people said it was negative, other people didn't. What do you guys think? Why? That sort of thing. But the job, generally speaking, we wouldn't expect people to give us more than maybe 3 to 5 hours a week. It was very much a sort of, you have other things in your life, you have a job, you have your university studies, but a lot of students, lots of people. So we weren't sort of expecting them to put in a 40-hour week. And also, quite a lot of the work that we asked them to do was quite repetitive. So we felt like, there
Yeah, it's
was.
probably difficult to do it full time, 40 hours a week, and probably the quality would drop as well.
Exactly. I mean, I think there was a sliding scale after about half an hour. you know, I I practiced myself looking through English word lists, and I found my concentration really wandering after, maybe 45 minutes if I was lucky. So for that reason, we kept the same people throughout this 5 months.
Brilliant.
Some languages were quick, languages that have a very sort of what3words friendly way of creating new vocabulary that made life a bit easier. Other languages where maybe they were very resource poor. With a language like Japanese, you can find a word list online, pay for it, and voila, you've got your database ready to go. But in a language like Zulu or Odia or Khmer, the resources aren't there online, so you have to build up um, in a lot more painstaking way.
Yeah. Yeah. So now that you have, do you say 61 languages, is it a plan to add any more, or do you feel like you've covered enough?
There's always, we've never covered enough, I guess, from my point of view. I think, this is such a vital technology for people. It does literally save people's lives. We will never cover all of the native speakers of the world in their native language. There's too many. But, there's always something else to add. There's always gaps. 61 languages doesn't include some languages that that one day we'll do, Filipino, Icelandic, languages like that. But we're really looking for those commercial opportunities.
Do normally companies come to you and say, we would like to have this new language as well?
So the reason we did Kazakh at the point that we did was we had a commercial opportunity with Kazpost, the National Postal Service in Kazakhstan. And obviously for them to integrate what3words into their systems, they needed both Russian and Kazakh language versions available. It's a bilingual country. And as a sort of national body, I guess, they need to be able to offer it. Just the same as in the UK for the emergency services have to give you the option to speak to the call handler in Welsh. Well, that's one of the reasons why there's a Welsh language version of what3words. Not many companies do a Welsh language version, but for us, it's extremely important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So you now don't work there anymore as an employee, but you're still in touch with them, right?
I am. I was full-time employee there for about 10 years. A couple of years ago, I decided that I was going to become a freelance localization consultant, linguist, do my own writing as well. But there's so much embedded knowledge from, like I said, having started at a company from the very beginning and taking it up to, 10 years in. It went from 5 people in a room in West London to 180 people in, company offices around the world, Mongolia, Vietnam, Trinidad, Germany. So yeah, there's so much knowledge that I had that it sort of made sense that then I would actually continue with what3words as a consultant. So yeah, I understand how it works. I know why we made particular decisions about particular words in particular languages. So yeah, I really enjoy working with them still. Also got a few other clients as well in that sort of localization strategy world as well. And like I said, I do my own writing. So yeah, I've got the best of both worlds, I think.
Do you also do a bit of music now?
Little bits. I've actually got a piece in a concert in a few weeks' time in London, which is in Latin, but I'm always planning to get back to it for sure. One day.
Well, it's been a wonderful conversation. Where can people find you?
Good question. I'm on LinkedIn, Jamie Brown, linguist. I think if you type that in, you'll get to me. The problem with my name is there's lots of Jamie Browns, so you have to qualify it with some other sort of adjective.
I see. I'll put the links in the show notes anyway.
Great. And my website, jamiebrown.info.
Perfect. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. With composing and language skills in the bag, and thanks to a random post on Facebook, his career took a turn. When I set out to create and grow this podcast, my aim was to talk about languages in a work setting in the widest possible way and inspire people to make use of their language skills. This is the kind of story we rarely hear about and that I'm keen to get out more. Please follow or subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend who may enjoy it too. And if you'd like to suggest a guest or want to know more about sponsoring an episode, please get in touch at the email in the show notes.